The last transmission from the sanctuary worlds carried the screams of millions. Admiral Sierra Voss listened to the recording 3 times before she finally turned it off. The Drath Collective had begun their final push. 12,000 warships moved through the void like a plague of metal locusts, consuming everything in their path. The Coalition fleet, 37 species united against extinction, had gathered what remained of their forces at the edge of contested space. It was not enough. It would never be enough. Voss stood in the war room of her flagship, the Resolve, surrounded by holographic displays showing the enemy advance. Red markers filled the screen like spreading blood. Each marker represented death on a scale most species could not comprehend. The Drath did not conquer. They consumed. Planets they captured were stripped of resources, populations enslaved or eliminated, ecosystems destroyed beyond recovery. 200 years the Coalition had fought them. 200 years of retreat, of desperate last stands, of watching worlds burn. Admiral, the Coalition High Command is requesting your presence at the emergency summit. Voss nodded to her aide and walked through the corridors of her ship. Human crew members saluted as she passed. They were young, most of them, born after humanity had joined the Coalition, raised on stories of alien wars fought in distant stars. They believed they were part of something greater. They did not know the truth. The summit chamber was chaos. Holographic projections of alien admirals filled the room, each one speaking over the others. Preth, the insectoid liaison who had worked with humans for a decade, stood near the back with his wings folded tight against his body. His compound eyes tracked Voss as she entered. "The sanctuary worlds cannot be defended," one admiral was saying. His species resembled floating jellyfish, translucent and glowing. "We must evacuate what populations we can and establish a new defensive line." "There is no new defensive line," another snapped. This one was reptilian, scarred from centuries of warfare. "If the sanctuary worlds fall, the Drath will control the central trade routes. We will be cut off from each other. Then we negotiate." "The Drath do not negotiate, they exterminate." Voss listened without speaking. She had heard these arguments before. Every few decades, the Coalition faced a crisis that seemed insurmountable every time they retreated, every time they lost more. Preth approached her quietly. "Admiral, your government has been silent. Earth has not responded to any requests for reinforcement." "Earth is considering the situation." "Considering?" Preth's mandibles clicked in what might have been frustration. "The largest enemy fleet in recorded history is bearing down on refugee populations, and Earth is considering." Voss turned to face him. Her eyes were calm, almost cold. The other species called her the Glacier because she never seemed to feel anything. They were wrong. She felt everything. She had simply learned to lock it away where it could not interfere with what needed to be done. "Earth will respond," she said, "when we are ready." "Ready for what? To watch billions die." "Ready to end this." Before Preth could respond, the main display flickered. A new transmission was coming through, marked with Earth's diplomatic codes. The chamber fell silent as the message played. It was simple, 3 words. "The fleet comes." Voss felt something shift in her chest. Relief, perhaps, or maybe dread. She had hoped this day would never arrive. She had known it would. "What fleet?" The jellyfish admiral's voice carried confusion. "Earth's patrol vessels are already deployed. What more can they send?" Voss did not answer. Instead, she turned to address the full assembly. "The Coalition has fought the Drath for 2 centuries, she said. "In that time, you have learned to see humanity as a minor power. Useful allies, perhaps, but limited. Our ships are slow. Our weapons are adequate but unremarkable. We contribute what we can." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "You are meant to believe that." Confusion rippled through the chamber. Alien admirals exchanged glances across vast distances of space. 15 years ago, when humanity joined this coalition, we made a choice. We chose to hide our true strength. We sent patrol craft and defense frigates. We fought beside you in small engagements. We let you believe we were just another species struggling to survive." Why? Preth's voice was barely a whisper. Because power attracts attention. Because showing everything you have invites others to build counters. Because the weapon you never reveal is the weapon that cannot be defeated. The main display flickered again. Sensor data from the edge of the system began streaming in. Something was emerging from hyperspace, something massive. "What is that?" The reptilian admiral leaned forward, his scarred face tight with confusion. "Those readings cannot be correct. The gravitational distortion alone is accurate," Voss finished for him. "What you are detecting is the Terran war fleet, 800 warships, each one built in secret shipyards beyond explored space, each one carrying weapons your scientists have never imagined." The sensor display resolved into visual range. Ships emerged from the hyperspace corridor, each one larger than anything the Coalition had ever built. At their center, a vessel so enormous it seemed to bend light around its hull. "That is the Judgment," Voss said. "My new flagship and the last thing the Drath will ever see." She turned to leave the chamber. "Admiral," Preth called after her, "what are you going to do?" Voss paused at the door. "I am going to end a 200-year war in a single day." She walked out without looking back. Preth had seen many impossible things in his long life. He had watched stars die. He had witnessed the birth of new species crawling up from primitive worlds. He had stood on the bridges of warships as they burned around him and somehow survived. In 200 years of service to the Coalition, he thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. The human fleet filled the viewscreen of his observation vessel like a wall of steel and fire. Ships the size of moons drifted past in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with weapons that made no sense to his tactical computers. Carrier vessels disgorged swarms of fighters that moved in patterns too complex for any pilot to execute manually. Dreadnoughts powered up weapon systems that registered on sensors as miniature stars. "This is not possible," whispered the navigation officer beside him. "Where did they hide all of this?" Preth did not answer. He could not. His mandibles had locked together in shock, a reaction his species had not needed since they were prey animals millions of years ago. At the center of the formation, the Judgment hung like a small planet. Its hull was dark, almost black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Only the faint glow of its engine sections revealed it was a ship at all. As Preth watched, weapons ports along its surface began to open, revealing devices that pulsed with energies his instruments could not. "Identify." His communication panel lit up. A human voice came through, calm and professional. "Coalition vessels, this is Admiral Voss aboard the Judgment. The Terran war fleet has assumed defensive positions. All Allied ships are requested to hold current positions and avoid the engagement zone. We will handle the rest." Handle the rest? Preth looked at the sensor data showing 12,000 Drath warships approaching, the largest enemy force ever assembled, and one human admiral spoke of handling it like a minor inconvenience. Across Coalition space, similar scenes played out. Alien crews stared at their displays in disbelief. Messages flooded communication channels, questions, demands, accusations. Why had humanity hidden this? What else were they concealing? Could they be trusted? Aboard the Judgment, Admiral Voss paid no attention to the chaos. She stood on a command deck larger than most ships, surrounded by officers who moved with quiet efficiency. Every station was occupied. Every system was active. The ship hummed with power waiting to be unleashed. "Enemy fleet entering maximum weapons range in 12 minutes, reported her tactical officer. "Acknowledged. Signal all ships to prepare for engagement." The Drath fleet continued its advance. At its head, the Devastator carried Fleet Marshal Garo, the most feared military commander in the galaxy. Garo had conquered 43 star systems. He had personally ordered the extinction of 6 species. His name was spoken as a curse across 1,000 worlds. Now he stared at his tactical display and felt something unfamiliar: doubt. Confirm those readings, he ordered. Confirmed, Marshal. The human vessels are genuine. Our sensors cannot fully analyze their weapon systems. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. Garo leaned back in his command throne. He had not survived 60 years of warfare by ignoring threats, but he had also never retreated. The Drath did not retreat. It was not in their nature. They are bluffing, he decided. No species could hide this level of technology. This is a deception designed to make us hesitate. We will call their bluff. His fleet pressed forward. Aboard the Judgment, Voss watched the enemy approach. Beside her, a communication panel showed an incoming transmission from the Devastator. She opened the channel. Marshal Garo's image filled the screen. He was tall for a Drath, his gray skin marked with ritual scars that told the story of every victory he had claimed. His eyes were cold, calculating. "Human Admiral," he said, "you have impressive ships, but ships alone do not win wars. I offer you one chance to withdraw, take your fleet and return to your homeworld. The Drath have no quarrel with humanity." Voss regarded him calmly, "And the sanctuary worlds will be processed as planned. Their populations will serve the collective." "You mean they will be enslaved or killed?" "I mean they will serve. That is the natural order. The strong consume the weak. Your species is young. You do not yet understand how the galaxy works." Voss was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried no anger, no fear, no hesitation. "Marshal Garo, you have attacked worlds under human protection. You have murdered billions of innocent beings. You have built an empire on suffering and death. Today, that empire ends." Garo laughed, bold words from a species we had not heard of 30 years ago. "You are about to learn why we were hiding." Voss closed the channel. Around her, officers waited at their stations, ready for the order that would begin the end of a war. She gave it. All ships weapons free. The Terran war fleet opened fire. Space turned white. Every sensor on every coalition vessel overloaded simultaneously as the human fleet unleashed weapons that had never been seen in galactic warfare. Beams of concentrated energy lanced across the void, each one carrying enough destructive power to crack a planet. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to near-light speed crossed the distance between fleets in heartbeats. The first wave of Drath warships simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, no wreckage spinning through the darkness. One moment 300 ships occupied a section of space. The next moment that section contained only expanding clouds of atoms. The matter that had been warships, crews, weapons, and lives had been converted into its most basic components. Preth watched from his observation vessel, his compound eyes struggling to process what they were seeing. His tactical computer had given up trying to track individual engagements. It now displayed a single message: analysis impossible. "Gods of the deep," breathed a crew member. "They are not fighting them, they are erasing them." The human fleet advanced in perfect formation, never breaking stride, never pausing. Each volley of weapons fire eliminated dozens of enemy vessels. The Drath fired back with everything they had: plasma cannons, fusion torpedoes, rail guns that had shattered coalition defenses for centuries. Their weapons splashed harmlessly against human shields. Aboard the Devastator, Marshal Garo stood frozen at his command display. The red markers representing his fleet were disappearing faster than his tactical officers could count. 3,000 ships gone in the first 10 minutes, 4,000 by 15. The greatest military force the Drath Collective had ever assembled was being taken apart like a child dismantling a toy. "Marshal, we must retreat," his second-in-command urged. "We cannot fight this." "The Drath do not retreat." "Then the Drath will die here, all of us. Every ship, every soldier, is your pride worth extinction." Garo did not answer. He was watching the judgment on his tactical display. The human flagship moved through the battle like a predator through prey, its weapons carving paths of destruction through his fleet. Nothing could touch it. Nothing could slow it. He had spent 60 years believing the Drath were the ultimate power in the galaxy. He had crushed every enemy, conquered every world, broken every resistance. And now he understood that everything he had accomplished was meaningless. The humans had allowed the Drath to win. They had watched from the shadows, building their secret fleet, waiting for the moment when they would reveal what true power looked like. Across the battlefield, human fighter squadrons hunted fleeing Drath vessels. The small craft moved with impossible speed and precision, their pilots augmented by technology that made them extensions of their machines. One by one, they eliminated ships trying to escape the slaughter. Coalition observers recorded everything. They watched Drath warships turn and run, abandoning formation, abandoning each other, abandoning any pretense of military discipline. Fear had replaced arrogance. Desperation had replaced confidence. The conquerors had become the conquered. 30 minutes into the engagement, Admiral Voss received a status report. Enemy fleet reduced to approximately 4,000 vessels. Our losses: 0 ships destroyed, 17 vessels reporting minor damage. Shall we continue? Continue. The slaughter went on. Some Drath captains tried to surrender. They broadcast on all frequencies, begging for mercy, offering anything in exchange for their lives. Human vessels surrounded them and waited. If they powered down their weapons completely, they were taken prisoner. If they showed any sign of resistance, they were destroyed. Marshal Garo watched his empire crumble. Every few seconds, another cluster of markers vanished from his display. The voices of dying captains filled his communication channels, screams of fear, prayers to forgotten gods, final messages to families that would never receive them. 1 hour after the battle began, the Drath fleet had ceased to exist as a fighting force. Fewer than 800 ships remained, most of them damaged, all of them surrounded. Over 11,000 warships had been erased from existence. Millions of Drath soldiers had died, and the human fleet had not lost a single vessel. The Devastator drifted among the wreckage of what had been the greatest armada in galactic history. Around it, human ships closed in like wolves circling wounded prey. Garo's tactical display showed no escape routes, no allies coming to help, no hope. His communication panel activated. Admiral Voss appeared on screen, her face calm, her eyes cold. Marshal Garo, your fleet is destroyed. Your soldiers are dead. You have 2 choices: surrender and face justice for your crimes, or die here alone having accomplished nothing. Garo stared at her for a long moment. His hands trembled at his sides. What are you? He asked. What are your people? Voss leaned forward. We are humanity, and you should have left us alone. Marshal Garo had never begged for anything in his entire life. He had risen through the ranks of the Drath military by crushing those who stood in his way. He had executed subordinates for showing weakness. He had watched entire civilizations burn and felt nothing but satisfaction. Mercy was a concept he understood only as a tool of manipulation, something lesser beings offered when they had nothing else. Now he stood on the bridge of the Devastator, surrounded by the corpse of his fleet, and considered his options. The human ships had stopped firing. They hung in space like patient predators, waiting to see what their prey would do. The Judgment dominated the view, its dark hull blocking out the stars behind it. Weapons ports remained open, ready to deliver instant destruction at the slightest. Provocation. Marshal, his second-in-command, approached cautiously. What are your orders? Garo did not respond immediately. He was thinking about legacy. For 60 years he had built something, an empire, a reputation, a name that would echo through history. Children on 1,000 worlds feared him. Generals studied his tactics. Entire species had been broken by his will. All of it meaningless now. The humans had not just defeated him. They had humiliated him. They had shown that everything he believed about power and dominance was a lie. The Drath had never been the strongest. They had simply never faced true strength. He turned to his communication officer. Open a channel to the human flagship. Admiral Voss appeared on screen moments later. She looked exactly as she had before the battle. calm, controlled, utterly without emotion, as if destroying 11,000 warships was simply another task to complete. Marshal Garo, have you made your decision? I have questions first. Voss nodded, ask. Why did you hide? Your fleet could have ended this war 15 years ago. Millions of your coalition allies died while you watched. Why? Because revealing this fleet would have changed everything. Other powers would have built weapons to counter us. The galaxy would have entered an arms race that would have made the Drath War look like a minor conflict. We chose to wait until we had no other option. And now everyone knows what you can do. Yes, which is why we hope we never have to use it again. Garo laughed. It was a hollow, broken sound. You think other species will simply accept this? You think they will trust you after learning you lied for 15 years? You have made yourselves the greatest threat in the galaxy. Perhaps, but we have also ended the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced. The Drath Collective controlled 30% of known space. Your species had killed more sentient beings than any force in recorded history. That is over now. And what happens to us, the survivors? Those who surrender will be treated as prisoners of war. They will eventually be returned to Drath territory after signing non-aggression treaties. Those who resist will be destroyed. There is no third option. Garo considered this. Surrender was unthinkable, but so was dying for nothing. His fleet was gone. His soldiers were dead. Fighting on would accomplish nothing except adding his name to the casualty list. But there was one more option. I will not surrender, he said quietly. But I will not order my remaining crews to die for my pride. I am broadcasting a message to all Drath vessels. They are free to make their own choice. He turned to his communication officer and gave the order. Across the battlefield, Drath captains received his final transmission. Some chose to surrender immediately, powering down weapons and waiting for human boarding parties. Others followed their marshal's example. Garo looked at Voss one last time. My species does not surrender, he said. But I can accept death with dignity. I want you to know something, human. This is not over. The collective will rebuild. Other marshals will rise. One day your secret fleet will not be enough. Perhaps, Voss replied. But that day is not today. Goodbye, Marshal Garo. The channel closed. Garo turned to his bridge crew. Most of them were young, loyal soldiers who had followed him into what they believed would be their greatest victory. They deserved better than this. Abandon ship, he ordered. All hands to escape pods, that is a direct order. They hesitated. Marshal. I said go, you followed me into this disaster. I will not ask you to die for it. Go home, tell our people what happened here. Let them learn from my failure. One by one, they left. The bridge emptied until only Garo remained. He stood at the viewport, watching human ships collect escape pods from across the battlefield. Enemies he had tried to destroy, now saving the lives of his soldiers. He did not understand it. The Drath would never show such mercy. Defeated enemies were killed or enslaved. There was no other way. But the humans were different. They had the power to destroy everything, and they chose not to. They could have let the escape pods drift until life support failed, but instead they sent rescue ships. They could have executed prisoners, but instead they offered medical care. Perhaps that was the true difference between them. The Drath fought to dominate. Humans fought to protect. And when the fighting was done, only one of those purposes left room for mercy. Garo activated his ship's self-destruct sequence. Computer, how long until detonation? 60 seconds. He closed his eyes. 59, 58, 57. Outside, the Devastator's hull began to glow as reactor containment failed. 30 seconds, 29, 28. Marshal Garo, conqueror of 43 star systems, destroyer of 6 species, most feared military commander in the galaxy, stood alone on his bridge. 10, 9, 8. He thought of all the worlds he had burned, all the lives he had ended, all the suffering he had caused. 3, 2, 1. The Devastator exploded in silence. And across the galaxy, the news spread. The Drath War was over, humanity had won. 1 year after the battle, the galaxy was still learning how to breathe. The Drath Collective had fractured into a dozen warring factions, each one too busy fighting the others to threaten anyone else. Former subject species rose up across their old territories, reclaiming worlds that had been stolen generations ago. Refugee populations that had fled for decades finally returned home to rebuild. And humanity had disappeared. The Terran war fleet had withdrawn to its hidden shipyards within days of the battle. Only patrol vessels remained in Coalition space, the same small ships that had been there before. If not for the recordings that every sensor array had captured, the galaxy might have convinced itself the whole thing was a dream. But the recordings were real, and so were the questions. Preth stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Coalition capital, watching delegates from 60 species argue about the future. The debates had been going on for months. What should they do about humanity? How should they respond to 15 years of deception? Could Earth be trusted? They lied to us, a Velian delegate was saying, her crystalline body pulsing with agitation. For 15 years they pretended to be a minor power while building weapons that could destroy us all. How can we accept them as allies? They also saved us, countered Amorthian, his tentacles spread wide in a gesture of emphasis. Without their fleet, the sanctuary worlds would have fallen, billions would have died, the war would have continued for another century. And what happens when they decide we are the enemy? What happens when humanity wants something the Coalition will not give? The arguments continued, circular and endless. Preth had heard them all before. Fear battled gratitude, suspicion fought hope. The Coalition could not agree on anything. Then the doors opened, and Admiral Sira Voss walked in. She was older than she had seemed during the battle. Gray touched her hair. Lines marked her face. She wore a simple uniform without medals or decorations. She looked like what she was, a tired soldier who had done what needed to be done. The assembly fell silent as she approached the central platform. "Delegates of the Coalition," she began, "I come before you to answer your questions and address your concerns. You deserve the truth, and I will give it to you." She paused, gathering her thoughts. 15 years ago, Earth made a decision. We saw the Drath War consuming the galaxy. We saw species being exterminated. We saw the Coalition losing ground year after year, and we asked ourselves what we could do about it. We could have revealed our true strength then. We could have entered the war with everything we had. But we knew that would only create new problems. Other powers would have seen us as a threat. The galaxy would have united against humanity instead of the Drath. We would have won one war and started another. So we waited. We built our fleet in secret. We sent only what was necessary to maintain our alliance, and we prayed we would never need to use what we had created. A Velian delegate interrupted. "But you did use it. Now everyone knows what humanity can do. How is that different from revealing it 15 years ago?" "Because now the war is over. The Drath are broken. The threat that united the galaxy has been eliminated. Yes, some species will fear us. Yes, some will try to build weapons to counter our fleet. But they will do so in a time of peace, not war. They will have decades to develop, not days. And perhaps in that time they will learn that humanity has no interest in conquest." "How can we believe that?" The question came from the Morthian. "You have the power to take whatever you want. Why would you not use it?" Voss was quiet for a long moment. "Because power without wisdom is destruction. Because strength without restraint is tyranny. Because we have seen what happens when a species believes might makes right. The Drath believed that. They built an empire on suffering and called it glory, and in the end they lost everything. Humanity does not want an empire. We do not want subjects or slaves. We want neighbors. We want allies. We want to live in a galaxy where our children can explore the stars without fearing what they might find." She looked around the assembly, meeting eyes of every shape and color. "Our fleet exists to protect, not to conquer. It will remain hidden, ready to defend the innocent against any threat. We ask nothing in return except the chance to be part of this coalition, not as rulers, not as leaders, simply as members, partners in building something better than what came before. The assembly was silent. Preth watched the faces of delegates processing her words. Fear still lingered in some, but in others he saw something else, hope perhaps, or the beginning of trust. A vote was called. The coalition would decide humanity's fate. The results came an hour later. 53 species voted to accept Earth as a full member of the Coalition High Council. 7 abstained. None voted against. Preth found Voss afterward, standing alone on an observation deck overlooking the capital city. "Congratulations, Admiral. Humanity has been accepted." Voss nodded. "For now, trust takes time. Some species will watch us for centuries, waiting for proof that we will betray them." "Will you?" She turned to look at him. Her eyes held exhaustion and something deeper, sadness perhaps, or the weight of carrying secrets too long. "No," she said simply. "We will protect them. As long as we exist, as long as our fleet endures, we will stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. That is what humanity is. That is what we have always been." She returned her gaze to the stars. Guardians in the dark, waiting, ready, forever.